from New York, and now yield 5 minutes to my friend and gentleman from California, Mr. J. Obernolte.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think I probably speak for just about everyone in this room when I say I think that our national debt and our budget deficit is the #1 existential crisis facing our country. Certainly, the facts back that up. This year, we will spend 17% of all federal revenue just paying interest on the national debt. The CBO put out a budget outlook a few months ago that says that this year, for the first time in the history of our country, we'll spend more on paying interest on the national debt than we do on our defense, and that by the end of their 20-year forecast window, interest on the national debt will have passed every other federal program in terms of spending. And in fact, by that point, 3/4 of all borrowing will go just to pay interest on the money that we have already borrowed. This is a problem that we have to solve, and the only way that we can solve it, it said when you're digging a hole, the only way to stop digging the hole deeper is to stop digging, and that's what we need to do. We need to stop spending. So that's why I was looking forward to this hearing, but I have to be honest with you, Mr. Chairman, the partisan rhetoric that I've heard so far this morning, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear throughout the day, really illustrates why the American public have lost confidence in the United States Congress to solve this problem. I wish that this is a problem that we could solve together. I wish we could all agree that we need to stop spending. This budget resolution that we're considering today takes a modest approach to solving that problem. We're talking about in this resolution reducing federal spending by a total of $1.5 trillion over 10 years. To put that in context, that's $150 billion a year. When we spend $7 trillion a year in overall federal spending, it's extremely modest. And yet, to hear the partisan outrage over this modest level of cuts is just nonsensical. I also have to admit, Mr. Chairman, that I was looking forward to seeing some of the amendments that were offered by folks in this hearing, because I thought this is supposed to be a deliberative body. We're supposed to talk about the merits of what we're doing here. And yet, every single one of the amendments that I've seen, as I've leafed through the amendments that have been offered, are talking about doing things to not cut spending. And just to be clear, we're not talking about specific programs here. We're the Budget Committee. All we do is we issue reconciliation instructions to the various policy committees. And every single one of the amendments that I've seen offered today just reduces the number of one committee or another to 0. And folks, that is not solving the problem. And let's talk about some of the other solutions that have been proposed. What I've heard said over and over and over again in the opening statements here is that we cannot cut revenues, right? Well, folks, this year we will collect over 17% of GDP in federal revenue, and that is above average for our country. We do not have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. And let me also dispel with some of the partisan rhetoric over extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. If we allow the TCJA to expire, it will increase taxes on over 65% of American households. So for all of these posters that I've seen on the other side of the aisle here that say Republicans want to cut taxes for billionaires, you ought to have a poster next to it that says Democrats want to increase taxes on over 65% of American families, because that is equally true. So I believe in nonpartisan government. I believe that together we ought to be able to sit down and figure out solutions to this problem. This kind of rhetoric is not helpful. So I urge my colleagues to take a more considered and deliberate and thoughtful tone as we have these discussions, and to let's work together to come up with a solution to this problem, because this is an existential threat, and if we don't solve it, our children and their children will be paying